Hi, this is Rob Sheen from the Source Conference, and I'm here with Walt Williams, who's the Director of Information Security at Monotype, and he's going to be speaking at the Source Boston event on May 9th and 10th, and his talk is titled Doing ISO 27001 with CISSP as the control set, which I found an intriguing idea. So how did you get the idea to kind of Frankenstein these two standards together, Walter?
Last year, I had an opportunity of meeting the folks behind the CISSP standard, and I was able to learn that this wasn't just your standard laundry checklist of security controls, which is how it came across to me when it was published by SANS. Turns out that the folks behind the standard are working with the security research community, especially the incident response community, to take the lessons learned from breach responses and to catalog it into a set of controls. The problem with the CISSP is, however, that there is no way to be audited against it. ISO 27001 somewhat solves that problem. It's always been a modular standard, while most people who implement it just blindly and without thinking implement ISO 27002 as the control set. There's nothing in 27001, which is to establish a management system that gets audited, that mandates that you use the ISO 27002 control set. You can use any control set you want. And so the thought was, here was a way of putting in place the control set that would help my organization, as much as any control set can, prevent data breaches, while in the process putting in place not only a management system so that I can measure its success, I can report on it to senior management, I can incorporate it in part of my risk management framework, but also most importantly, provide a mechanism of having it reviewed by a third party so that we can demonstrate to our customers, to our business partners, that these controls are being put in place rigorously. One of the things I've always liked about the ISO standard is that it's not a list of checkboxes, unlike PCI DSS or NIST. You're required on an annual basis to show that you not only measured your successes, and CISSP gives you a very, very lovely set of metrics to do that against their control set, but that each year you've made efforts to improve upon your successes from the prior year. So the idea of constant continuous improvement of your security program is somewhat unique to ISO, and it just enhances the value of what you get out of the control set, especially with the way that they've redone the controls in the version 7 of the critical security controls. The metrics in version 7 are designed around maturity. They're designed with the thought that security is a journey, it's not a destination. So over time, you're going to be enhancing your control set. They've pointed their measurements against the Six Sigma principles, where over time you would move from signal level 1 through and up to as much as possible signal level 6. That fits in very nicely with ISO's thought of constant improvement and provides you with a maturity measurement as well as an effective measurement.
Right. So the talk it really intrigued me because I've always thought of 27001 and 2 and their predecessors as being kind of inseparable things. So it's a really intriguing idea to swap out a different control set. So for those that aren't as familiar with 27001 and CISSP, could you just provide like a 50,000-foot view of what each control set has, like literally like a couple sentences on each one, just so people can understand the difference?
Certainly. 27001 is about putting in place a management system. It has no controls in it whatsoever. So you're doing risk management, you're doing security awareness, you're measuring the effectiveness of your controls. You're reporting on these to the appropriate levels of management. That management cares whether or not you're being successful or not. And that you've put in place a process to handle when things get broken. 27002 is a less prescriptive set of technical controls than most security standards, but it requires things such as you undergo a penetration test, you have a security incident response plan, you evaluate your third-party vendors, you onboard and offboard employees properly. Mm-hmm. CISSP doesn't do all of those things. It's really organized around breach response. But what they've done for you is they've pre-set up a mapping between their standard and NIST, their standard in ISO 27002, their standard PCI DSS, etc., so that you can see where the gaps would be. So what you want to do is you're putting together a management system so that you're properly managing risk in your enterprise, is you want to take a look at that gap between where the CISSP begins and ends and understands the places where it doesn't cover. So as an example, there's nothing in the CSC about employee onboarding or offboarding. There's nothing in the CISSP about third-party risk evaluation, because the standard is entirely focused on data breach prevention. But 27002 doesn't have anything in it that would require you to use a web application firewall. 27002 doesn't have anything in it that requires you to do both static and dynamic testing of your applications. 27002, in other words, is written a bit more abstractly about how you implement technical controls, with the thoughts that you're putting in place those controls that manage risk. Well, the CISSP controls were specifically written to control the risk of data breach. And then you can put in place, other controls, either from 27002 or from NIST or from PCI DSS, that are appropriate to your organization. So if you have third parties that you need to evaluate, you'll want to put in place something in the way of a third-party risk management program. That will have nothing to do with CISSP, but it will become part of your management system. Mm-hmm. If you have the need to terminate employees, or even more importantly, the need to move an employee from one position to another and ensure that they no longer have the access rights they had before. Well, those are things that are covered to a point inside of CISSP. So you've got a one-to-one mapping between those controls in the CISSP and those controls that are in ISO 27002. Right. If you have an environment that has the requirement to be NIST compliant because you're doing business with the federal government, then obviously you would want to look at the mappings to FedRAMP. You'd want to look at the mappings to the NIST cybersecurity framework or to SB 800-53 and similar documents. But again, the Center for Internet Security gives you those mappings. Mm-hmm. You want to be careful a little bit about using those mappings because they're one way. They don't tell you the things that come out of the CISSP that are not represented inside of these other standards. So if you have the requirement to be NIST or PCI DSS or etc. compliant, you're going to want to make certain that you've done that gap analysis yourself and put in place the appropriate controls that go beyond what the Center for Internet Security is recommending, so that you can do more with your information security management system than just prevent data breaches.
Right. So one thing I'm curious about is what environments would it be appropriate to swap out the control set for one for the other? Because I know like a lot of vendors might require you to be 27001 and 2 compliant, or at least 27001 audited. You know, if that's true, are they going to easily accept that you've swapped out the control set, or are you going to have to do a lot of explaining?
I'm actually going to have to do that explaining to my auditor, not to my third party. One of the things about the ISO reports is that the end result is a certification of compliance.
I see. Okay.
And my responsibility is to make certain that I've met the full requirements of the standard, which includes, by the way, that I've done that gap analysis and mapping back to 27002, and that I'm putting in place appropriate controls to manage risk. So if I have the requirement to do third-party vendor risk analysis, and that's not going to come from the Center for Internet Security Standard, I need to have something in place to do that. So I'm still going to need to have the rigors of the full ISO 27002 control set available to me. But because I've replaced controls where there is mapping with something more precise, I can have more deliberately designed controls around things such as application security, where I need to now demonstrate that I am doing static analysis, that I'm doing dynamic testing, that I have a web application firewall in place. Things that ISO doesn't require, things that NIST doesn't require, things that PCI DSS doesn't require, but do come very much out of the Center for Internet Security's critical control set.
Cool. So it sounds like it's more of making sure the controls are appropriate than having it be any specific one. That's actually cool because it sounds like this actually is a plus version of takes the baseline of 27001 and makes it better rather than just swapping it out for something completely different. So I like this.
Yeah, that was my thought exactly. Wrap a management system around the Center for Internet Security's critical control set and allow it to become an auditable standard. Two areas that in the existing incarnation of the Center for Internet Security standard are missing gaps.
Right.
And there's some active conversation within the Center for Internet Security as to whether or not they need to go there in future revisions. But ISO provides me with a path to do that now. And the best thing about ISO is it's an internationally recognized standard. And if implemented properly, allows me to demonstrate compliance with external laws such as the GDPR. Matter of fact, there are a number of, I don't want to say hints from some of the European member nations, but darn close to hints that they're going to be looking for organizations to certify as ISO compliant as a mechanism to demonstrate GDPR compliance.
Right.
And
cool.
So this gets ourselves a little bit ahead of that game.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely going to be a big thing going forward for folks. So cool. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing your talk, and we'll be seeing you at Source Boston. So for those of you watching in, if you want to come continue this conversation or learn more about ISO 27001 or 2 and CISSP, come and see Walter's talk at Source Boston in May.
Looking forward to seeing you there.
All right. Talk soon. Thanks.
Thank you.